Liwei looked at the lady and asked her what she meant by that, stating that it was written on her advert board that she could talk to loved ones who were no longer in this world, and that he had come to test how true it was, that this was the only reason he was there and nothing else. The lady shifted her gaze to him, studying him carefully, before stretching out her hand and telling him to place his on hers. Liwei hesitated for a moment, then did as she asked. She traced her fingers gently across his palm, closing her eyes as she spoke, saying that she saw a huge fire, voices screaming within the flames, and 3 bodies consumed by it. Amara's eyes widened as she looked at Liwei, and he, his own eyes narrowing, whispered to her that perhaps she knew him already, that she had read about him and what had happened to his family. The lady continued, her fingers still tracing over his palm, saying that his mother wanted him to know he shouldn't let himself suffer for what had happened, that he should live his life fully and not let his heart bleed. Liwei remained silent, his eyes locked on hers, listening intently. She kept her eyes closed, her fingers moving with care, and said that his father wanted him to understand that the fight was not his alone to fight, that he should allow the universe to deliver justice to those who had wronged him. She added that his little sister wanted him to know that she loved him. She finally opened her eyes, releasing Liwei's hand, and told him that this was all she had received. Liwei said nothing at first, taking in the moment before finally speaking, suggesting that perhaps she had read about him and what had happened to his family, that she knew him. The lady laughed softly, telling him that she would be foolish to concoct such schemes, that he wanted the truth, and she had simply told it. What he chose to believe or not was no concern of hers. Her eyes glanced at Amara briefly before returning to Liwei as she asked if they were sure they didn't want to know how they were connected, that it was something fascinating, something she had never witnessed before. Liwei pulled out a note and paid her, then turned to Amara, suggesting they should leave. The lady, however, insisted that they needed to know this, that it would be interesting. Amara, curious, asked what exactly was so interesting. Leaning forward, the lady took both of their hands in hers, closing her eyes, and told them that their bond was not ordinary, that their meeting was no accident. They were brought together, destined to find each other. Still holding their hands, she explained that they had been lovers in a past life, that they had made a pact to find each other again in the next life, and that they had indeed succeeded. She added that it was rare for 2 people who had loved each other in a previous life to meet again and repeat the cycle. Liwei and Amara exchanged a glance, hardly able to believe her words. She continued, saying that they would face challenges, something bigger than themselves, and if they managed to find each other again, it would be miraculous. Nothing would ever break them apart, she said, emphasizing that they belonged together, made for each other, and that as long as the promise from their past life endured, they would keep finding each other repeatedly, bound by a spiritual connection, profound yet simple. She let go of their hands, and Liwei and Amara looked at each other, stunned. Liwei pulled out another note and paid her again before taking Amara's hand and walking out with her. Amara whispered that what she had said was crazy, almost frightening. Liwei leaned in, gently touching her face, telling her not to let it scare her, that the lady was only trying to make money, that she would say anything to ensure they believed her, even if it wasn't true. He assured her that nothing would happen, that he would always be by her side, protecting her no matter what. Amara smiled, and he pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, holding her tightly. As he held her, he thought about how he didn't believe any of the lady's words, and yet he would still seek justice for his family, ensuring that those responsible for their deaths faced the same wrath, and nothing would stop him. Amara stayed in his arms, and he pondered how insane it would be if they had actually known each other before, and how miraculous it was that they had reunited in this life. A few days later, Amara and liwei headed back to the city, the semester having come to an end. Amara rested her head on his shoulder as she slept, and he glanced at her, gently touching her face, wishing they could have stayed longer. He knew that returning meant change, that responsibilities awaited him, too many to count. Leaning down, he pressed a soft kiss on her forehead. As they approached the city, Amara was startled by loud noises outside. She slowly opened her eyes, looking out the window, her gaze widening as she saw streets filled with people protesting, chanting for East Gate Group to be returned to its rightful owner, holding signs that read, "Justice for the true heir, justice for liwei." She looked at him and asked if this was what he meant when he had said things were going to be different, that a lot of things were going to change. liwei looked at her and nodded, telling her that he had to take back East Gate Group and that this was the only option he had. Taking her hands in his, he told her that he would drop her off at home, that he had a lot of things to do, and asked her to promise him that she would be safe, to make sure her panic bracelet was on, and to keep updating him through messages about how her day was going. Amara looked at him and nodded, promising that she would be safe, adding that she hoped things went well on his side. She took out her cell phone, glanced at it, and smiled back at liwei, telling him to drop her off on campus instead, since her professor had finished checking her research and it was ready for collection. She added that she would just get it and go home. liwei looked at her and agreed. He turned to the chauffeur and told him to head to Eastgate University, making a U-turn as they drove toward the campus. Once they arrived, Amara looked at liwei with a smile and told him she had to go and that they would see each other at home. liwei nodded, telling her to be safe. Before she could step out, he pulled her back and hugged her tightly, holding her as if he didn't want to let go. Still in his arms, Amara asked if he was okay. He only told her to let him hold her for a while, that he didn't want her to move, that he just wanted to remain like that with her. Amara's body yielded into his embrace, allowing him to hold her, squeezing her as if he never wanted to release her. Slowly, he let go, faced her, and looked into her eyes, telling her he would see her at home and that she should take care. Amara nodded with a smile, opened the car door, and stepped out. He watched her walk away, ensuring she disappeared into the horizon before instructing the chauffeur to drive off. He grabbed his cell phone and switched it on, and a flood of notifications appeared. Missed calls from news outlets, messages from Master Shen. Without hesitation, he dialed Master Shen's number. The phone rang for a moment before Master Shen answered, urgent and direct, telling liwei that they needed to meet immediately, that it was urgent. liwei agreed, asking him to send the location, telling him that he just needed to go get his car and would be there. He hung up, eyes drifting to the window, watching the protests still raging, a smile tugging at his lips as he thought about how his plan had worked. The only thing left now was to finally take over. Meanwhile, at East Gate Group, people had gathered outside, surrounding the premises, demanding answers. Inside, chaos reigned as employees ran around in panic, unsure of what to do, while security secured the doors to prevent the protesters from entering. liwei's uncle had called an emergency meeting, trying to address the situation and manage the growing crisis. He sat visibly frustrated, stressed, demanding answers from the management about what was being done to control the situation. Fang spoke up, telling him that they had tried to involve the police, but the protests were deemed legal, and the protesters were not harming anyone. He added that he was attempting to contact media houses to help calm the situation. liwei's uncle, growing even angrier, stood and shouted at him, saying he didn't need to hear about past failures. He needed real solutions. A manager, breaking the tense silence, suggested that since the people were on liwei's side, it would be best to get him to come over, make a statement, and clarify the misunderstanding, hoping the protesters would listen to him. liwei's uncle paused for a moment, considering the idea before agreeing, saying it was a good solution. He turned to Fang and commanded him not to just sit there, but to call liwei immediately. Master Shen and liwei sat across from each other. The map of their plan spread between them like a battlefield. Master Shen looked at him, noting how neatly the pieces were falling into place, and warned that they had to make sure no mistakes happened now. He added that he was certain liwei's uncle would try to lure him to East Gate Group to make a statement on his behalf and calm the protests. Before he could finish, liwei's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, Fang, then looked to Master Shen for permission. Master Shen gave a slight nod. Liwei answered, and his uncle's voice came through, frantic and pleading, asking if he was back yet and explaining that he had been unable to reach him, which was why Fang was calling. Liwei said he was indeed back, sounding casual as he asked what had happened and why there were protests when he returned. His uncle told him things had spiraled out of control, that there was no time to waste, and urged him to come over and make a public statement, to tell the people he wasn't stealing the company, but training him until he was ready. Liwei stayed silent for a moment, choosing his words so nothing would raise suspicion. Finally, he agreed. He would come. He would talk to them. It must be a misunderstanding. Everything would be fine. His uncle, relieved, begged him to hurry before things got worse. Liwei promised and ended the call. He looked at Master Shen, who moved a chess piece and then met his gaze. When he goes to make the statement, Master Shen said softly, they won't see him coming. That will be the moment to turn the tide, to put them in a tight spot and force them to surrender the position that rightfully belongs to him. Liwei nodded and stood, telling Master Shen to get ready. Master Shen rose, stepped closer, tapped Liwei's shoulder, and said he was proud. They had come this far, things were going their way, and he hoped there would be no distractions. Liwei met his look and replied that there would be no distractions. The mission was always the priority. He glanced once more at Master Shen and said the real game was about to begin, then left. Meanwhile, Amara walked across campus with her research paper in hand, smiling at the professor's comments. Her mind drifted to liwei. She hoped his plan to take back East Gate Group would succeed. It was what he had been planning for years, after all. Her phone buzzed. Momo's name lit the screen. She answered, and Momo, breathless with excitement, asked if she was on campus and screamed that she was on her way, that she had so much to tell her, and that Amara should wait in her dorm room and not go anywhere. Amara, delighted, agreed to wait. After hanging up, she made her way toward the dormitories. Unseen, Yan sat in her car watching Amara closely, noting every step. She pulled out her phone and called the person on the other end to confirm. Amara was heading to the dorms. Everything needed to be ready, and there could be no mistakes. She hung up, satisfaction and a hint of something colder in her eyes. Meanwhile, Liwei's uncle sat in his office, anxiety coiling in his chest as he waited for Liwei to arrive. Unable to stay still, he began pacing, glancing out the window at the swelling crowd outside, the protests growing louder and larger by the minute. The door swung open, and he turned sharply, expecting Liwei, only to see Fang standing there, his expression tense. Fang told him that calling Liwei over to give a statement had been a bad idea, that everything had been carefully planned by Liwei from the start, and that summoning him now would only make things worse. Anger surged through his father as he shot back that all Fang could do was oppose, that if he had any real solutions, none of this would be happening, and there would have been no need to risk calling Liwei over. Fang tried to respond, but his father cut him off, insisting that he clearly had no real solution, and Fang, frustrated, warned that if they continued down this path, they would lose East Gate Group, and that it would only be a matter of time before Liwei proved him right. Before Fang could storm out, the door opened again, and Liwei walked in, calm and composed. Relief washed over his uncle as he rushed forward, telling him he was glad he had made it on time, that it was chaos out there, and the mistakes needed to be fixed immediately. Liwei remained steady, telling him not to worry, that he would fix the mess and that it was his fault anyway for being careless with the interview that started it all. Fang stood silently to the side, fury simmering as he watched. Seeing how much Li Wei was pretending, manipulating his father, acting like a savior while being the reason for the chaos, knowing he needed solid proof. Li Wei's uncle handed him a document, telling him it was the speech he was going to give and that everything had been written down so he wouldn't make a mistake. Li Wei glanced at it, then back at his uncle, telling him not to worry, that he would deliver the speech exactly and soon the chaos would be behind them, and East Gate Group would still be in their hands. His uncle smiled, reminding him to go through it carefully because they couldn't afford any mistakes. Meanwhile, Amara made her way into Momo's room, looking around before taking a seat on the bed and reviewing her research again. She couldn't help but think about the moments she had shared with Li Wei during their mini-vacation, how everything had been magical, how she had seen him truly happy and laughing, wishing the moment could have lasted forever. Her thoughts were interrupted by a loud knock on the door. She asked who it was, but there was no answer. The knock came again, and she smiled, thinking it was probably Momo trying to prank her since she knew she was waiting. Slowly, she walked to the door and opened it, curiosity rising in her chest.